honored that this event is taking place today as a Nigerian, because the future of Nigeria and economic growth and political stability of Nigeria is very critical to overall well-being of Africa. And so I would like to thank the co-sponsors of this event today, the Institute of Politics, especially Heather and Kathy, for working tirelessly with me to make sure that this event is pulled off well, and also the Belfast Center for International Affairs, Professor Nicholas Burns, Graham Allison, Professor Callistus Juma, and Friends of Africa International. And I would like to introduce the moderator for this event. She's well-beloved faculty, a mentor of mine, and one of my all-time favorites, Professor Monica Toft.
Thank you, Anyeka. So, good evening, everyone, and it's my pleasure to introduce two very distinguished gentlemen, both ambassadors, one a former ambassador to Nigeria, Ambassador Walter Carrington, who also happens to have a lot of ties to Harvard. He got his undergraduate degree at Harvard College and then his JD, and spent a lot of time in public service, but then returned to the academy and taught for a number of years at Simmons College, and is now writing a book. He stepped down from Simmons College and is now writing a book and doing some consulting. And then we also have the current ambassador to the United States from Nigeria, Ambassador Adefuye, who is also, he has a PhD in history, and he's been the ambassador to the United States since 2010. And we're going to have a conversation this evening, we're going to go to about 7 p.m., about the status of Nigeria, its economic and political development, the opportunities and challenges, and then also the relationship between the United States and Nigeria, which does seem to have been special over the years. And when Nigeria got its independence in the 1960s, the United States and Nigeria have always had very close ties. And the United States was one of the ones, especially under Ambassador Carrington, when Nigeria went through particularly difficult times with its democratic political development, of really putting pressure on the Nigerian government to respect human rights, electoral processes, and to sort of bring democracy to that corner of Africa. And in many ways it has done that. So we're going to start with a series of questions, and we're going to open it up after that. And I'm going to start with the first sort of observation or question last week to the ambassador, that Time magazine nominated your president as one of the top 100 most influential persons in the world, actually. And it was written, if you go, you can go to Time magazine, it was written by another president of Africa, President Sirleaf, who was actually a Kennedy School graduate. And I'm just wondering if you feel that was warranted. Do you think that he is one of the most influential? He's been president for 2 years now. And some people say that he's doing an amazing job, actually. The economy is doing okay. Unemployment rates are going down. On the other hand, there are other, we have oil subsidy issues that are happening. The federal government says that it's going to pull some funding from educational institutions. We're at an educational institution that's going to harm students. So it seemed to be more of a mixed picture. So I'd like to open it up with that. Some reflections on the current president's role in helping Nigeria move forward. And this is a discussion about Nigeria's future.
Thank you very much. And let me first, through this medium, thank the authorities in Time magazine for picking my president as one of the 100 most influential persons in the world. The only problem I have with them was that my president will not be able to attend the event, and they asked me to go and receive the honor, the award on his behalf. They know to say he has to be there in person. So, but I mean, you can imagine that kind of attitude on his part. Mm-hmm. It's a very big honor for him, and any less mortal would throw everything aside to come and receive that. But because he's so much entrenched in setting the pace for Nigeria, mm-hmm. building a better Nigeria, he asked me to go and receive the award in his name. Let me first say that Dr. Goodluck Jonathan is one of the people who have been described as a man who was not really born great, but then he achieved greatness, but also had greatness thrust upon him. Mm-hmm. And has been carrying that greatness with such equanimity and such sense of responsibility that's more determined to change Nigeria for the better. One thing that is quite clear is that he's determined to leave Nigeria a much better place than he found it, and there are already evidence of that. This was a man who was, look as if he was just primed by Providence to lead Nigeria out of the doldrums. He was a university lecturer, then became a commissioner, then deputy governor of the state, then governor, then deputy president, then president. As if you see that trajectory, as if Providence was just preparing for this assignment. And then this was the man, as I used to tell fellows, that when I first met him, it was as if we had a discussion in the usual staff club, university staff club, where we academics, we criticize government. We were powerless to do anything. Then now God put him there. And that's why he's so focused in trying to remove what we call the fundamental weaknesses in the body politic of Nigeria. All those weaknesses have been entrenched and which are not being removed, and which have been dragging the country down. He's determined to remove it. He takes hard decisions that may be relatively unpopular to people, but then when they're necessary, he has the courage of conviction to take such decisions. I'll just give you a few examples. One, I had the privilege of going with him when he met President Obama, when he was an acting president. And he promised President Obama that one thing he knows that has been hindering Nigeria's political process, hindering our progress, is people's belief that there can be no true democracy in the country. Democracy, we believe, is solid bedrock of progress. And he assured President Obama that he will conduct a free, fair, and credible election. I tell you, he appointed an electoral commission, the chairman of whom he never saw, but whom he believed, who was reported to him as having that strength of character to do it. Professor Jega was not a friend of Jonathan. He appointed him, gave him completely free hand, and he conducted the freest, fairest, and most credible election in Nigeria so far. This was attested to by international observers, mostly from America, the American government, Johnny Carson, Secretary of State Clinton, and President Obama. And then from there he went on to pick a cabinet, especially the economic management team, consists of people who have unquestionable professional competence and unquestionable political integrity. Our Minister of Finance just lost out from being President of the World Bank in a context which everybody thought he should have had it, but for the power of the American dollar. But then we have ministers of finance, minister of trade and investment, minister of agri. They are world beaters in their respective profession. Our minister of power too. All of them, incidentally, they were all groomed, trained, lived, and worked here. And they are central bank governor, has won so many awards. These are people who form the core of the economic management team that are trying to transform the country. They have an economic transformation agenda which aims at providing employment, diversifying the resource base of the country, giving more preference, more emphasis on non-oil exports so that the economy will be diversified and have a strong base, and also encouraging other areas like agriculture, solid minerals, textiles. So diversified base of the economy, generate employment for the use of this country, and then be able to tap our resources and lead and fulfill Nigeria's potentials. There have been all kinds of successes, some progress have been made. I'm aware that some Nigerians think that the progress is slow, but then it's steady, it's coming, because years of neglect of the economy cannot be restructured or restored within 2 years. So is everybody, and this is what Time Magazine fortunately were able to realize, and they named him as one of the most influential 100 persons in the world. I believe that apart from his own personal attributes, it is the importance to Nigeria in the geopolitical atmosphere that made them to do this. Because the American government believes that if Nigeria gets it right, Africa will get it right because of our influence. And because 1 out of every 5 Africans is a Nigerian, and 1 out of every 8 black persons in the world is a Nigerian. And since we established our democracy, we have not only been consolidating democracy, We have been the vanguard of establishing, strengthening democracy in Africa. In Cote d'Ivoire, it was Nigeria that led the struggle to ensure that democracy triumphed. In Libya, we were the first to recognize the transitional national government. Right now in Mali, we led the way to say that coup cannot go on. And we're beginning to start now, threatening those fellows that you go back to the barracks. So in terms of strengthening democracy in Africa and in the world, we are in the forefront because of our geopolitical importance. And this is being done because we have a leader with a clear vision like Goodluck Jonathan, leading the way to make Nigeria politically stable, make Nigeria politically strong, and lead Africa towards enshrining democracy, human rights, rule of law, and all those that make society peaceful and ordered.
Thank you. Ambassador Carrington, I mean, you've been a student of Nigeria, and actually you declared yourself a fellow Nigerian a couple of years back. And you know, your viewing of the more recent history, you were ambassador from 93 to 97, but a lot has happened since that time. And we do have a new president, and he seems to be trying to combat corruption and sort of bring and usher in democracy. What's your feeling about the next 5 to 10 years for Nigeria? Because I agree with the ambassador that how Nigeria goes is a good signal for Africa writ large. And given your knowledge and history and practice in the region, I'd be curious about your views as well.
Right. Well, first of all, let me say what a great pleasure it is to be here at the forum and to talk about Nigeria. You mentioned the fact that I consider myself to be Nigerian. Well, you know, actually, I'm a Nigerian in-law because one of the things that I did when I was in Nigeria was to steal one of its greatest treasures, my wife, RSITY. Who was
the money from him.
And so it's a great pleasure to be here. And she is a graduate of the School of Public Health here and is working on problems of international public health. In terms of what is happening now in Nigeria, I think that there is an opportunity, I would hope at last, for Nigeria to assume the place that I have always felt that it ought to have in international affairs. Nigeria is the largest country by population in Africa, the 6th largest in terms of population in the world. It is one of the major suppliers of petroleum to the United States. But it has, I think, for so long been sort of a crippled giant, unable, I think, to really realize its true potential. And I hope that in the not too distant future, you know, one talks now about the BRICS, about Brazil, Russia, India, and China, and South Africa. And I hope that very soon, instead of talking about the BRICS, we'll be talking about the fact that we're on the dawn of a new era, and we'll be talking about the BRICS, which would put the N in there, which would be Nigeria. The problems that Nigeria faces, being such a large country, with so many people in 36 states, has been a daunting challenge to anyone who is in Aso Rock, which is their White House. And I think that President Goodluck Jonathan has an opportunity, I think, in the remaining time of his presidency to really push Nigeria ahead, and I'm very hopeful that this, in fact, will happen.
All right, terrific, thank you. So, Ambassador Adefowye, turning to we have 2 ambassadors here, which is really nice because we can talk about foreign relations, and actually you already raised the issue about sort of Nigeria seizing the moment to be a regional leader, if not a global leader. And so I'd like to talk about sort of the relationship with the United States over time. You were mentioning that a lot of investors are now looking toward Nigeria. It's trying to expand its portfolio of economic development. And is it the case that the United States has a special relationship to sort of develop over time? And Ambassador Carrington, I'd ask for you to sort of comment on that as well.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy with the state of relations between Nigeria and the United States. Only last week, a week before the last, I had the privilege of accompanying the Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria to a meeting with His Excellency Joe Biden, America's Vice President, at a time when the Vice President was here to be a guest speaker at two events, one in which the embassy, in collaboration with the Corporate Council in Africa, organized an investors forum for Americans who are to invest in Nigeria's agriculture, part of the diversification program of President Goodluck Jonathan. And then he was also a guest, the Vice President was also a guest speaker, a guest at the annual general meeting of the U.S. Exim Bank. And so those three events, he came, and during the meeting with the Vice President Biden commended the excellent state of relations between Nigeria and the U.S. And he did say one thing, that they are so happy with the binational agreement between Nigeria and the United States that they are thinking of taking it to a higher level. The binational commercial agreement was signed, one of the things I really look back to and rejoice at for having achieved since I came here. We signed a binational commercial agreement with the United States in April 2010, just 3 weeks after I arrived. And there were four major components of the binational commercial agreement. There are now five. The first we call TGI, Transparency, Governance, and Integrity. That has to do with political governance and all that, elections and all that, democracy and rule of law. Second one is on energy and investment, assistance in areas of power, electricity, and all that. Third one is on food security and agriculture, which is part of the thing we just did on investment. And the fourth one is on Niger Delta and regional security. Because of Boko Haram, we're going to go into that later on, we had to break that fourth component of Niger Delta and regional security into two separate aspects. There's now one Niger Delta, and there's another one on regional security. So those are the five components. And Vice President Joe Biden described Nigeria as the anchor for the U.S. in Africa. Those are his exact words. And he said the binational commercial agreement has worked so well that we want to take it to a higher level. All those four components have met at least twice. We saw that there's so much of American presence in Nigeria. Some meetings are held there, others are held in Abuja. So the binational commercial agreement is the framework for cooperation between Nigeria and the United States. It has worked so well in Nigeria that other countries, notably Germany and Canada, are now trying to sign up a binational commercial agreement with Nigeria. As I'm talking now, my foreign minister is in Ottawa signing the binational commercial agreement between Nigeria and Canada, just along the line that we've done. And if anything, that shows that it's working so well that other countries want to copy that framework. So because in the implementation, it is within that framework that we're pursuing our economic transformation agenda. And an important component of our economic transformation agenda is the importance we attach to the private sector. It has to be private sector led. Two, and an important component is foreign direct investment, especially from the private sector. It is in consonance of that we have so many, when these meetings take place, private sector is involved, they go to Nigeria to do what they want to do, and Nigerians come here. For the first time, we've had a Nigerian economic team comprising of businessmen coming to Nigeria, coming to America, being led by the American Ambassador in Nigeria to come and invest and see areas of cooperation between Nigerians and Americans. So in all those four components, under the TGI, Transparency, Governance, and Integrity, American government provided massive support to the Electoral Commission in the conduct of the last election, which was judged as being very, very successful. Under that, on the food security and agriculture, that investors fund we had, it was a massive success. There are over 600 people there, and with 60 U.S. registered companies. And so many deals have been made, and in fact, the State Department is now organizing a follow-up mission of some of those who participated in that to go to Nigeria so that the deals made can be solidified. In energy and investment, GE has signed an MOU with Nigeria that they are going to provide some thousands of megawatts to help us with electricity. And then the U.S. Exim Bank has provided Nigeria with some billions of dollars guarantee for American businessmen wanting to invest in the power sector in Nigeria. And I can go on and on. And there's so much of collaboration between Nigeria and the U.S. And on the international scene, I must say that it's not only one way, anyway. Because of the mutuality of it, because of the concurrence of interests, we have similar objectives in the geopolitical atmosphere. Nigeria and the U.S. believe we want a world that is free from terrorism, that is free from nuclear proliferation, and a world in which the tenets of democracy, human rights, rule of law thrive, and a world in which there's peace. So because of that, America sees Nigeria as the one country that can be the arrowhead of such principles in Africa. And this explains more importantly, America believes that Nigeria has the kind of government that they want to see everywhere. Dr. Goodluck Jonathan has a PhD in biological sciences. Architect Namadi Sambo is a world-renowned architect who even had his own private practice in Miami before he became vice president. These are people who know what to do. We've never had it so good. Having a vice president and a president all being people of high intellect and who know what to do and who are pursuing it, and with all the vigor. You could see the way they've been, these days, it's no longer in Nigeria of anything goes. You've got to be able to do something. And what is more important, I should stress this, because we had an election that's free, fair, and credible, and because people now know the days of election rigging are over, and because these governors and ministers and officials, including me, now know that if you don't perform, there's no way you can rig election and get back to office. You'll be shown the red card in 4 years. Everybody's on their feet, and you now find governors, ministers, trying to outpace themselves to do what they are supposed to do, trying to develop the country. That's why you find so many governors and officials from Nigeria coming here, trying to justify their pay, trying to justify what they are doing. And so that's the beauty of democracy. And so when America sees that, they know that that's a country you can rely on, and because of the importance of Nigeria in the world. And that's why right now, every African issue that's taking place, the U.S. will contact Nigeria. What shall we do? Sometimes through me, sometimes through Abuja, the embassy. So the state of relations between Nigeria and the U.S. is very good. The only thing we did not like, we thought we should have the World Bank president. You did not give us that. We made our point clear that our candidate is better. But you see, what can you do? The power of the dollar.
So, Ambassador Carrington, I mean, you were ambassador during a period that was quite trying, actually, yes. And you were one of the more vocal as the ambassador, saying, look, you're the government, you have to respect human rights and promote democracy. I'm going to ask you a very obvious rhetorical question. Would you rather be ambassador today to Nigeria, given that there does seem to be some progress being made along the democratic front, and the economy is doing fairly well in some ways, not completely, but in some ways?
Well, I think I've been asked the question, if I knew now the kind of experiences I had in Nigeria, would I still want to have done that? And I said, absolutely. I can think of no more exciting time or meaningful time in my life than those 4 years I spent in Nigeria. I think to be in a place where you have the opportunity to make a difference, I think is extremely rewarding and challenging. You know, before I went to Nigeria, when I got the call from the White House, I was quite excited because they were about to have an election in June. I got the call, I think, in March or something, and I look forward to the fact that I would be able to go there and present my credentials to a democratic government. Well, of course, in June of 1993, June 12th, they had an election. They elected Moshood Abiola. The government refused, the military government refused to acknowledge this, and so they annulled the election. And I found myself going to Nigeria under quite different circumstances. The military had temporarily stepped aside, and I was the last ambassador to present my credentials to what was then the interim government, which was headed by a Nigerian businessman who had been the Nigerian representative for General Motors. And so right after I presented my credentials, and a week or so later, there was a military coup. The military was back in power. And those were times when the relations between Nigeria and the United States were quite different from what the ambassador has talked about as exists today. In fact, we found ourselves with 3 different kinds of sanctions against Nigeria, which was very unusual. Here was a country with which we had normal diplomatic relations, and yet we had sanctions. And when I look at what they're talking about in terms of sanctions with Iran, et cetera, I remember those days in Nigeria, and I wish that we had in Nigeria the mildest, even the mildest of sanctions that they have against Iran, because the sanctions we had, especially in terms of restrictions on travel, were quite mild compared to what we're talking about now in Iran. But at that time, they were quite radical. At that time, you couldn't fly from the United States directly to Nigeria because of the fact that the airports were considered unsafe. And there were also sanctions against Nigeria because of the failure of the government then to cooperate with the United States in our policy against the import of narcotics. In fact, at that time, it was estimated that 50% of all the heroin that was brought into the United States brought in through Nigerian criminal organizations. So that was quite a different time. And when finally democracy returned, the opportunity was then open for Nigeria to become the kind of country which its resources, its vast resources in both minerals and in persons, would make them the kind of country it ought to be. I don't know how many of you have seen the recent report. I think it was in the New York Times or somewhere like that, showing that of all the immigrant groups, in fact, of all groups in the United States, Nigerians have done better than any other ethnic group in the U.S. in terms of educational attainment. That a higher number and a higher percentage of Nigerians have gotten degrees from college, undergraduate, graduate schools, professional degrees, have done better in education than any other group. And the hope was, and the hope is, that this great wealth of education in the Nigerian diaspora can be realized back home in Nigeria, and that many of these people will now feel the opportunity that they did not feel at the time when I was in Nigeria, that there's an opportunity to go back and to contribute to Nigeria. And that is something that I hope will happen, and that will help to advance the country in some of the ways that that the has talked about.
Okay. Well, let's open it up. We have about 20 minutes for questions. There's 4 microphones. If you want to ask a question, there's 2 down here and then 2 up in the dais. Please introduce yourself and don't make statements. We want short, nice questions, and you can direct them to either of them. So we'll start here.
Hi, my name is Valeria. I'm a member of the Forum Committee here at the Institute of Politics. And as recently as this morning, the Huffington Post was reporting on the recent political upheavals in West Africa and the potential for such a pattern to continue into Nigeria due to the Boko Haram movement and Nigeria's relatively recent democratization. What does the government of Nigeria plan to do to respond to Boko Haram?
Okay, I knew Boko Haram would. I knew Boko Haram was going to come up. I'm not surprised. But let me tell you this. I'll just repeat what I've been telling to American businessmen. Every country in the world has its own security challenges. Nigeria is not an exception. But I want to assure you that, first, I'm sure there are some journalists here. They also tell you that good news bad news made good copies. The point I'm making is that there are so many good things happening in Nigeria, much more than Boko Haram, that everybody's now focused on now. Most journalists are focused on Boko Haram. Well, look, like I said, every country has its own security challenges, but then it depends on how the government handles it, so that it does not negatively impact on its developmental process. I lived in London for 14 years. I was working at the Commonwealth Secretariat. We had the IRA. Britain is still an investor's destination now. There was 9/11 here. America is still waxing strong, the most powerful nation in the world. I mean, all that kind of, but because you have been able to handle it well, I can show you, with our foreign partners, our foreign friends, we are handling Boko Haram very well. 2, Boko Haram seems to have played into the hands of some armchair critics of Nigeria who deliberately, knowingly, describe Nigeria as being split between Christian North, Muslim North, and Christian South. There's nothing religious about Boko Haram. Even though they burn churches, they have also been burning mosques. They went to Kano and shooting everybody on the road, anybody could see. Kano is a Muslim country. Even though they attain notoriety through their Christmas attack on churches and thereabout. But the point I'm saying is that even the traditional leader of the Muslims, the Sultan of Sokoto, was here and openly condemned Boko Haram. Said true Islam does not burn churches and all that, does not kill people. The point I'm making that, but I must admit that Boko Haram is a reflection of some past systemic failures. We are beginning to, the kitchen is coming to roost on the past injustices, past misgovernment of the country. And therefore, it has brought Goodluck Jonathan's regime some challenges. But and because it's a potpourri of causes. It's poverty, unemployment in some parts of the country. Not only in the north, there's poverty and unemployment in all parts of the country. The corruption, past corruption, and also, what is also more important, which people here, our friends in the media refuse to acknowledge that, the porous nature of Nigeria's borders. We I mean Nigeria, we were the brainchild, ECOWAS was our own brainchild. ECOWAS is the regional organization in West Africa, your equivalent of your OAS here. We championed that among West African countries, there's something called protocol of free movement of citizens. Anybody could come around, so long as they were West African to enter Nigeria. And Nigeria's level of development is higher, much higher than that of surrounding neighbors. So you have surrounding neighbors from Nigeria, Chad, and the Benin Republic who look like Nigerians. In any case, I mean, many of you, some of you are Americans there. If you go to Nigeria, nobody look at you. The two Jasmines look like some of my students in the university. So not to talk of fellow West Africans. So you have these people who are suffering unemployment, who are very poor, who have migrated to Nigeria because of economic opportunities. They are easy cannon foders easy to recruit to do something for Boko Haram people. There are people who are recruited to do all this. Then there's the fact that because of the kind of revolution that Goodluck Jonathan is leading, some established politicians are not happy about it. They cannot fathom the way in which Jonathan is getting the support of everybody. I'm sure when they see him now, one of the 100 most influential persons in the world, they go and tell some Boko Haram to throw bombs again. They cannot imagine that he's doing so well, and they want to create problems for him. Johnny Carson, the American Assistant Secretary of State, said, by the present nature of the Nigerian government, the personalities who are leading it, and the program the government has had, if they can only lead them to rule for 4 years, the country will transform. And so you have the politicians trying to stop this. So I'm not saying it's just because of politicians alone. Like I said, past this government. But then government is doing it. We are tackling in 3 areas. First, we are strengthening our counter-terrorism measures with support of the American government. 2, massive economic transformation. All these projects we are doing, agriculture, all this the investment in solid minerals and all that, is meant to create jobs so that there will be less people to be recruited for all this. And then we also practice a policy of inclusion, which everybody will feel part of it. So it's a multiplicity of factors that cause Boko Haram. It's a multiplicity of factors we are using to contain it. And I'm very, very sure that we shall live up to the challenge. And we shall survive Boko Haram, and Nigeria will take its rightful place as the leader of the black world.
Thank you. Okay. So I'm going to request that you keep your answers just a little shorter because we have a lot of people interested in talking with you.
But I didn't to say that on Boko Haram. Because
Sure.
Boko Haram tends to negate all that we are trying to do. I mean, it's not as bad as you people think, please.
Okay, so this young woman here, please introduce yourself.
Sure. Hi, my name is Oyebola Olabisi. I'm a student here at the Kennedy School. And the later part of your question, of your answer, partly addresses my question, which was that I think the concern with many Nigerians is that, yes, we know that many good things are happening, but there's a lot of concern when we feel that the government kind of just sweeps aside or doesn't take as seriously as we think these questions of terrorism. There have been times when I remember asking this question to you, Mr. Ambassador, when you came last to speak about Boko Haram, and you said that, oh, it's because the elections are coming, it's going to be a thing of the past very soon. This was before the elections last year, and it just has gotten worse. And so the president has been reported to say things like, oh, it will fizzle out. We know, every country has its own challenges, which is true. So my question was going to be that what exactly is the government doing, which you touched on at the last part. So perhaps you could expatiate on that, because I think it's a problem of confidence of the people and the government wanting to know exactly what measures are being taken so that when suspects are escaping from government custody, people are just worried. And so it's just a request for just more communication on what exactly is the government's policy.
So the official strategy, and then communicating that strategy.
I think I mentioned the official strategy when I was referring to the last bit. 3-pronged approach. We're doing the economic transformation agenda, jobs for everybody, and that to ensure that both North and South, speed up the developmental process, that people will get jobs and be less of people to recruit. And then we're practicing a politics of inclusion, democracy, open government, open system of government, accountability, a massive attack on corruption, and so that people will see that government is really doing it a lot. And then at the same time, law enforcement, counter-terrorism. We're receiving support from every part of the world, including the United States of America. So but then the point is, you said when last I came, I was talking about it because of the election. Maybe, I don't know exactly when I came, but the point is, you just justified my point. If I said that time, the outcome of the election disappointed some people who thought that Jonathan could not win. So just a professor in one university coming, and all those who have been practicing politics for so many years, they didn't believe he could win. But Nigerians are wiser with education. People now tell me that no matter where you come from, it's been so bad that one youth from part of the north that was supposed to be conservative said, we don't want these people who are not computer literate to be our leaders anymore. Saying this one, does it know how to, can he send an email? So it's that kind of thing we are beginning to see. New generation, what we call a paradigm shift in the country. Nigerians now know that nobody talk of secession anymore. Because we have to be together as a country because the size of Nigeria is an advantage. So all these Boko Haram people, I think, in any case, if you read the newspaper, if you read your newspaper regularly, you see that the intensity has decreased. And since some 2-3 months ago, 2-3 weeks ago, since we had this support from all these other people from the international community. And there are sporadic attacks here and there, but the intensity has decreased, and we'll get there. Thank you.
So this gentleman up here. Yep.
Oh, thank you. My name is Arthur Fobma. I'm from Liberia, and I really want to tell you that I'm very happy to hear such a good news from this panel about Nigeria, because Nigeria is actually a great friend to Liberia. One major problem we have in Africa is the point of sustainability of such a good news, especially as it relates to having this kind of good leadership being institutionalized rather than being surrounded by one person. After Jonathan, one next. After Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, one next. So I don't know what is being done to ensure that such a good leadership is being institutionalized. And also the next question is on the area of communication. Good work is being done in Africa, because I know it from Liberia, but the communication out there is different. What is the government doing to address these two concerns?
Well, I think I must admit that our communication system is a bit weak, and we are doing all we can to improve it. But the problem is, you fellows in these developed parts of the world, your journalists are interested in the ones, the sensational. They are interested. I was observing an election in Zanzibar when I was in the Commonwealth, and I was watching what these people called a disruption of the election process. And they said over 100 people have been reported killed in a stampede that broke out at an election center. And I was there, I was looking at the thing. And only 2 people were injured. But CNN was reporting over 100 people were injured. And when they mentioned the place, I'm looking at the thing now. What are people reporting? So that's the kind of thing you have. Well, the fact that government opened schools, the president opened schools for people called the Amajiris, who are the people who are not educated enough. He didn't catch any news there. But if the Boko Haram people kill 5 people in Kano, it will be top news. So we are doing our best. We don't have the gadgets to do as much as people in this world, in this part of the world can do. But then the problem is the media craving for sensationalism, and the thing that is bad news that make good copies. Constructive things are happening. None of the media here reported our investors forum, which are many companies here. They will not report it. But catch a Nigerian, get a Nigerian because who was trying to just overstay his stay here and is arrested at the airport. It will be news. So that's the problem.
Ambassador Carrington?
Yes.
I mean, how can countries like Nigeria, just more generally in Africa, make sure that some of the good news gets out? I mean, you're an ambassador and having to report back and that sort of thing. Any advice for the current president of Nigeria about how he can market these forums and make sure people understand that some progress is being made?
Yeah, I think it's not just a question of good news getting out, because I think one of the problems we have is that there is really so little understanding about so many African countries. For example, let us take Nigeria. We tend in this country to sort of see things through templates that have been designed for other parts of the world. This whole question of the war against terrorism, and we tend to then look at the Middle East and then measure the rest of the world by sort of what's going on in the Middle East. Take Nigeria, for example. Nigeria is unique in the fact that there is no other country in the world in which there is so even a division between Muslims and Christians. You know, in most countries, Muslims are either a great majority or a great minority. Christians are in a great majority, great minority. In Nigeria, they are it's almost a 50-50 split. Now, I think the great miracle is that in a country as large as Nigeria, with this kind of a split, that there hasn't been more of a problem between religions, that many of the problems in Nigeria, which have to do with a lot of other things, are attributed to clashes between Muslims and Christians. You know, one looks at, for example, at Darfur, that whole Darfur question, which became such an issue of great importance in this country. Suppose, for example, Darfur, instead of being Muslim, had been Christian, then one would have looked at that as a battle between Christians and Muslims, whereas it was really a battle between a ruling Muslim elite in Khartoum against another part of the country that was also Islamic, but was quite different, and there were all kinds of other issues at play. But that is never recognized in a place like Nigeria, and so people always see things in the way they see things in terms of the Middle East. And I think the ambassador made a very, very good point about the fact that so many times people talk about Nigeria and every conflict as if it is a conflict between what they call the Muslim North and the Christian South. They even tried to interpret the elections that way, et cetera, when in fact there are so many other factors which are in play. For example, when I was in Nigeria and there was a military dictatorship which was led by a northern general who was a Muslim, nevertheless, the greatest opposition that I found in the Yoruba area of Nigeria came from Yoruba Muslims who were as opposed to the military government as were non-Muslims in the country. And so, in fact, in Yoruba land, the Yorubas are one of the 3 largest groups in Nigeria. Half the population is Muslim, half the population is Christian, and yet you can never tell from one's name who is Christian and who is Muslim because of the fact that there is an identity with Yoruba culture which is quite different from what one finds in the North, where Northerners, as Muslims do in so much of the world, adopt Arabic names. On the whole, that is not the case in Yoruba land, and so Muslims and Christians will have Yoruba names and not Arabic ones, and so I think that there is a problem with trying to see Africa and African countries in terms of the dynamics of what's going on there. Rather we look at Africa and try to fit it into this war on terrorism, just as we did during the Cold War when we tried to fit Africa into the framework of the Cold War and missed what was really going on in so many countries, and it led to us supporting dictators in a number of countries only because those dictators sided with us in the Cold War and not with the Russians or Chinese.
Thank you. So we've run out of time, and I apologize to those who I wasn't able to get to. But Ambassador, I wanted to give you the last word. Do you have any concluding thoughts and that you want to share with us?
Well, thank you very much. Let me once again thank the organizers for giving us the opportunity to tell you what is happening in Nigeria. Well, it's always a good experience to come here to come and exchange views with students. once a professor, always a professor, in spite of the challenges of diplomacy. Well, Onyeka I don't need to thank her. She's always been like that, you know, so I'm not surprised she's doing all this. And the two Jasmines, I'm very grateful for what you've done. Now, the last word I would just say is, the future for Nigeria is bright. The future is bright, the future is Nigeria's. For the simple reason that for the first time we have well-qualified, dedicated, and committed leadership who are not only able, but willing to take decisions, to take steps that guarantee a Nigeria of our dream. A Nigeria with a balanced economy, a Nigeria which will be one in which our children, all of you who are Nigerians, will be proud to come back to and work. A Nigeria in which there will be adequate supply of infrastructure. A Nigeria in which corruption will be reduced to the minimum. No country is corruption-free, not even here. So where corruption will be reduced to the minimum, in Nigeria where everything will be according to recognized internationally acceptable standards. And because, we are saying this because we have a dedicated and committed leadership, a vibrant population. Nigeria, apart from like I said, 1 out of every 8 black person in the world is in Nigeria. And we have not only that, we have 160 million people now. And they are mainly young people, vibrant people. Unlike in other parts of the world where they have aging population, our population constitutes people who are very young. And like Ambassador Carrington said, by the way, I must thank Ambassador Carrington for the seminal role he played during the dark days when we were fighting the dictatorship. He stuck out his neck and spoke for the Americans and for himself too, to show that Nigeria should be democratic. We've never forgotten that. And that's why we gave you our daughter to come with us.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you for joining us. This ends our session, and it was a delightful conversation.